Hi everyone, we're going to take a look at ratios, rates, proportions, and unit conversions. These are all fractions, but they're all pretty straightforward. Now ratios compare values, and usually we use this to compare things that we are counting. Like if we counted the amount of boys in the class and the amount of girls in the class, we would write the ratio of boys to girls. And there's several ways to write ratios. If we counted and there was 6 boys and 8 girls, then you can write it as a fraction, 6 to 8, just like that. You can write it 6 to 8. You can write it 6 to 8. It doesn't really matter. All of those are equivalent. The fraction form is nice because then you can do math with it later. Related to ratios are rates, but rates are used to compare two measurements. It shows how one measurement varies in comparison to another. A common example of this would be speed. If you're driving 75 miles per hour, that tells you how your distance in miles varies with time in hours. So we have 75 miles per 1 hour. And actually, when we have 1 in the denominator, this is a special rate. It's called a unit rate because the denominator is 1, the unit is 1. Now, not all rates are unit rates, but you can reduce a rate to a unit rate. So if you know that you went 100 meters in 10 seconds, that's a rate. It tells me how far I went compared to how long it took. But if I actually do the division, 100 divided by 10, I get 10 meters per second. And now it's a unit rate. So that's all a unit rate is. So these compare measurements, unit rate, we just do the division to get 1 in the denominator. And then we have proportions. A proportion is just an equation that states that two ratios are equivalent. So if I have 5 is to 10, that is exactly the same thing as 1 to 2. And we check these by cross multiplying. So cross multiply, right, I'm going to take this and this. So 5 times 2 should be equal to 1 times 10, and 10 is equal to 10, so that works out. And this is handy if we don't know something. So we're saying 6 is to 42 as 9 is to what? This what we can find, right? So we cross multiply. 6x equals 42 times 9. 9 times 2 is 18. 4 times 9 is 36. 378 equals 6x. Whoops, that's an x. Divide by 6, divide by 6, and x is 63. And so we have a ratio. So 6 over 42 is the same thing as 9 over 63. So that's rates, ratios, and proportions. Now we're going to use some of those tools to look at unit conversions. And what I'm interested in is, say, converting. We can convert a lot of different things, but a lot of times in science we measure in meters and centimeters and kilometers, and in the United States we measure in feet and inches and miles. So I want to know, what's 1 mile in terms of kilometers? I don't have a nice, easy way to do that. I don't know what that conversion is. What I do know is relationships between miles, feet, and inches, and kilometers, meters, and centimeters. So I'm going to start with what I know. I know 1 mile equals 5,280 feet. I know 1 foot equals 12 inches. So those are the relationships I know from my American units. That's going to help me, but it's not quite enough. I also need to know some things about these metric units. I know 1,000 meters is equal to 1 kilometer. I know 100 centimeters is equal to 1 meter. And I know 2.54 centimeters is equal to 1 inch. So what I need to get from miles to kilometers means I have to find a relationship between miles and kilometers. I have a relationship between miles and feet, a relationship between feet and inches, a relationship between inches and centimeters, centimeters and meters, and then meters and kilometers. So I have to go through all of these steps in order to do this unit conversion, but really it's just a matter of figuring out the ratio of one thing to another, right? At the end of this, we're going to have the ratio of miles to kilometers. So let's see. We have 1 mile, and I'm going to put this over 1. The 1 doesn't change anything, it just helps me keep track of my units. So 1 mile, and I want to change from miles into feet. That's the relationship I know. So that means I want to cancel those mile units. So I need miles on the bottom, which means down on this conversion factor, I'm going to divide both sides by 1 mile because that gets me 1 mile on the bottom. Now 1 mile divided by 1 mile is unitless, it's just 1, and so I have 1 is equal to 5,280 feet. So 1 mile, 5,280 feet per mile. This is the ratio of feet to miles. It shows me how many feet are in a mile. It's also equal to 1 because 1 mile and 5,280 feet are exactly the same thing. So I haven't changed anything except units. I've multiplied by a very well-chosen 1. And now I need to get rid of those feet. So I'm going to go to my next relationship. I know I'm going to divide this equation, 1 foot, 1 foot, and so I can say, okay, I can multiply by 1 over feet and 12 inches. And so what I've done is this mile cancels this mile, leaving me with feet. But now these feet cancel these feet, that leaves me with inches. So now I need to get rid of those inches. And I know 1 inch is 2.54 centimeters. So I'm going to divide both sides by 1 inch, and I see 2.54 centimeters per inch. And then my inches cancel my inches, and I'm down to centimeters. And now I need to get from centimeters to meters. So I want to cancel those centimeters. So I'm going to divide by 100, centimeters, not 1,000. And so I have 1 meter per 100 centimeters. And my centimeters cancel my centimeters. And then finally, I'm going to go from meters to kilometers. So 1,000 meters per 1 kilometer. Now this looks like a mess, but really if we simplify stuff, it's not. So this meter canceled that meter, and the only unit I have left is kilometers, and then all I have to do is multiply all these ratios together. So 1 over 1 is 1. I don't really care. And remember, when you're multiplying fractions, you multiply numerators and then you multiply denominators. So 1 times 5,280 is 5,280 times 12 times 2.54 times 1 times 1, so I don't have to worry about that. And this is kilometers divided by 1 times 1 times 1 times 100 times 1,000, which is just 100, 0, 0, 0. So 5,280 times 12 times 2.54 divided by 100, 0, 0, 0, and we get 1.609 kilometers. Now what we just said is 1 mile is equal to 1.609 kilometers. So I can say 1 mile equals 1.609 kilometers. And this actually gives me a new ratio. So a lot of times people run 5K races, which is 5 kilometers. So I can use this if I want to know 5 kilometers is equal to how many miles. And to do that, we would just use a proportion, right? We want the proportion. So 5K miles, or 5K is to how many miles, would be the same thing as 1.609 kilometers to 1 mile. So we just cross multiply, and we take 5 times 1 is equal to 1.6 times x. So 5 divided by 1.609 gets me 3.107. 3.107 miles. That's a 5K race.